Oh, well, thank you very much, Marla. I appreciate that. All I wanted to do was first and foremost to recognize my colleagues, Marla, Hamilton, Jasmine, Quinn, and Stanley Stone, who've put together these webinars. I think they've done a really terrific job. And as Marla said, and as Jasmine has directed you to our website to look at the different webinars that are there. Early on in the COVID work from home um, piece, Marla really pulled together the notion of focusing on mental health as an incredibly important element of sustainability for our small business community, and worked very hard in partnering with on the Goga and with the Scattergood Foundation to think through a series of topics that could be supportive. And I just really appreciate Marla's uh, thoughtfulness and foresight in doing that and recognizing all of the different elements that go into helping your business run successfully. So I appreciate the team very much. We're very pleased that you're joining PIDC's webinar series, and we're even more pleased to be partnered with Anna Greenwald with On the Goga, and thank her for her time and effort in putting this together on this session, which will focus on your employees. So with no further ado, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you find this informative. Anna, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for having me, all of the wonderful friends at PIDC, and welcome to everybody who's here today. Looks like we got a bunch of people in the audience right now, so it's nice to meet you. We'll get into introductions in a second. We'll start off, I'll open up my chat box again, just so that I can see all you guys in here. I'm gonna be asking you guys a lot of questions throughout this session that we're gonna be doing today. So if you haven't popped open the chat box yet, go ahead and do that. It's at the bottom of your screen. You should see a little chat button. And can you guys all see this screen over here, strategies for well-being? Is that looking good for you guys? Looks good? Amazing. All right, let's get to it. So, like I said, I am Anna Greenwald. I am the founder and CEO of On the Goga. We are an organizational well-being company based right here in Philadelphia. And I see some of you guys have already found the chat. So yes, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, that would be amazing. I'll give you a little quick introduction of who On the Goga is and why PIDC has invited us here today to talk about employee well-being strategies. So we are, as I said, an organizational well-being company based in Philadelphia. We have a very simple guiding principle, which is that happy people do great things. I will get back to what organizational well-being is. We'll be talking about that a lot in our session today. It's as a way to approach the health and happiness of your organization. But I do want to take just a second to talk about happy people do great things, this guiding principle that we use here at On the Goga to really guide all aspects of what we do, whether we're doing a workshop, building a client program, doing consulting, training, even our technology platform. What this means is that pretty much every single company in the world, in Philadelphia, without fail, I'm sure many of you guys feel this. I know we've felt this. I know PIDC works with a lot of organizations who have felt this. During this last year, companies and maybe even a larger percentage of individuals have had their lives turned absolutely upside down. So what we're going to talk about today in this workshop is not how to make everything seem like it's okay, right? It's about providing research-based, practical tools and resources and strategies for you guys to create environments within your teams, within your organizations, where we can elevate our well-being, our happiness in small but really impactful ways. So like I said, this applies to everything we do here at On the Goga, and I hope that what you guys take away from this workshop today are practical tools to make your lives and your organizations a little bit happier, a little bit healthier in the midst of the challenges of daily life. So my first question for you all, as I said, I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions. So pop open that chat box at the bottom of your webinar. And I'm just curious who you are. I see your names here in the attendees section, but tell me your name. Tell me what company you're from, whether you're, a one-person organization, whether you're a larger organization, how you are a part of that organization, what your role is. And then really, if you don't want to go through all that, the thing that I'm super interested in, my first question for you is just, what is one thing personally right now during the pandemic that you have been doing for your well-being? So feel free to answer this, whether you're on the PIDC side or an attendee coming and joining us today. Open up the chat box, and this could be a single word. Like you could be like, Anna Greenwald, CEO of On the Goga, walk, right? I've been walking a lot. That seems to be a pretty safe, easy way to care for myself. Or it could be, you know, Sam, PIDC, Friday night wine. There are really no wrong answers here. I'm curious just to get a feel from all of you all out there. What's one word or one action or one way that you have been focusing on your well-being? So as we wait for those to kind of come in, I'm gonna really quick go over what we're gonna talk about today. So what we're gonna be doing today, why we're here today, is that we're gonna gain a deeper understanding of the impacts of employee well-being. So we're going to kind of talk through what employee and organizational well-being are from maybe a different perspective. And then we're going to really get into just a bunch of practical implementable strategies that you can use for your teams. And I'm going to be asking you guys a lot of questions throughout, like this question, as I was saying. But if you have like a longer form question, we're going to save some time for Q&A at the end. So if you have like a long or super specific question, feel free to put that in the Q&A box. But if a question comes up as we go, or I ask you a question, definitely feel free to use the chat box. So what we're going to do as we go through, we're going to define what the heck organizational well-being is. We're going to zoom in on the factors of employee well-being and what makes that up, why it's important. We're going to talk about COVID barriers to well-being, because as I'm sure you guys, this is session 4 of a session all about mental health. We know that COVID has presented a lot of barriers individually to organizations. And then we're going to go through and talk about really specific tools from the employee well-being side, leadership, operations, and policies. So we're going to talk about all that today. All right, let's look at what some of you guys have said. All right, so we got Debbie here, second half transitions. I work out almost every day. Yes, absolutely. Calvin was saying that walking and focusing on my family. Yes, absolutely. I love these 2 examples in the chat because it really speaks to the wide array of what well-being can be, right? It can be going on a walk. It can be working out. It can be just taking some time to focus on our family. Sometimes well-being looks like just changing priorities, right? Sometimes well-being looks like taking a break. Sometimes well-being looks like putting in a little bit of extra work to care for a family member, right? I like to start by asking this question. And again, if you guys, any of you listening, want to throw in the chat one thing that you've been doing for your well-being, we start to see that well-being is incredibly unique. It is highly specific. And I think that's what's so interesting about this session. At On the Goga, we work with organizations of all sizes to develop the well-being of their teams. And that's what we're going to talk about. What is organizational well-being? And one of the things that makes that different than talking about individual well-being is that, you know, if I'm talking to Calvin or I'm talking to Debbie or I'm talking to Elizabeth about their individual well-being, we can come in and figure out what makes them feel well, and we can find strategies to make sure that they have the tools, the scaffolding, the resources they need to feel well, right? The information, the education. When we start to get to a larger group, one of the challenges, but also opportunities that we have in terms of creating an environment for well-being is that well-being is different for everyone. So while I might think getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and going for a hike in the woods is well-being, you know, someone else might be like, I mean, that sounds maybe nice, but I'd rather, you know, stay home and pour myself a really nice glass of whiskey and sip on it while I read some amazing book on philosophy, right? And so well-being doesn't look the same for everyone. Yeah, like Sam said in the chat, reading and walking, talking on the phone with my family and friends, right? So well-being looks different for each of us. When we think about what is well-being, just defining that on an individual level, well-being is an adapted skill set of mental and behavioral practices that lead to an ongoing experience of health, happiness, and prosperity. So let's just break this down really quick. Well-being is a skill set, right? Well-being is not a state that you arrive in and you're there forever, right? Even the happiest, healthiest, most prosperous people have bad days, right? They have anxieties, they have stresses, they have illnesses, right? So well-being is not something you achieve. It's not an end goal. It's not somewhere that you arrive in physically. It's a skill set of mental, cognitive practices and behaviors that we engage in that create this ongoing experience of health, happiness, and prosperity. We're able to arrive in moments of happiness to have ongoing sustained health and prosperity in our lives. So again, it's not necessarily doing yoga every day of quarantine or eating all organic food or, I don't know, having perfect blood pressure, although those are great and wonderful if you have them. But it is a skill set that informs how we approach everything in our life. And the research on well-being and human flourishing it's pretty incredible. I mean, we live in this amazing time now where there is just such an amazing body of research on what helps human beings to feel happy and healthy and prosperous. And if you like to nerd out on that kind of stuff like I do, there's like a plethora of it. I'd be happy to give you some resources. But what we see from that is that healthy behaviors, whether they're around physical well-being, emotional well-being, financial, social, environmental, they come back to how we think and how we behave. So as an individual, when we cultivate things like mindfulness, which is, it's not meditating, it's just awareness, right? Noticing, how do I feel? What am I thinking? What emotions am I having? Resilience, this kind of understanding of our own challenges and adversity and the ability to move through it. Self-compassion comes up in there, empathy, purpose. When we can cultivate these cognitive and behavioral skills, we have higher levels of health, happiness, and life satisfaction. And so that's why well-being can look so different, because it's not about doing one thing or the other thing or the other thing. It's about how do we bring awareness and empathy and thoughtfulness into how we make our life choices and how we think about our adversities and our challenges and our successes. And so yeah, well-being can look like someone doing a workout, or it can look like this father on the screen who's figuring out how to spend time and give attention to his children while also managing priorities around work and life and helping himself through a time where he kind of messes it up, right? That's what true well-being looks like. So then what is organizational well-being? Well, you guessed it, an adapted skill set of practices that lead to an organization's health, happiness, and prosperity. So just like well-being isn't being a marathon runner, organizational well-being is not having a whole entire team full of marathon runners. It's the sustained implementation of practices, policies, leadership practices, day-to-day behaviors, right? Our company culture that improve and support the health, happiness, and prosperity of our people. Because our people, our organizations are built on the employees that run them, right? Unless you're a one-person company who has a tech platform and your whole company is your tech, right? Even then, you as an individual have a huge, kind of driving factor as to how that tech is utilized, where it's getting out, where people are using it and interacting with it on any given day. And so in order for us to have truly healthy and thriving organizations, we have to put in practice regularly these policies, these behaviors, these standards that support and uphold our employees' well-being on every level, and recognize that it is unique and different for everyone. So guess what? A lot of these skills and practices mirror the skills and practices for individual well-being. So from mindfulness, we have awareness, right? Understanding what's going on with your team, what are their needs, an ability to notice, okay, here's what we're saying we're going to do versus here's what we're doing, right? Empathy, that listening and understanding and feeling with not just your employees, think about this from the context of your clients. Great organizations are empathetic to their clients' needs. They can understand and anticipate how their clients or customers are feeling, what they're going to need, right? That's why so many of you all out there, I know there's so many PIDC businesses that have made big pivots during COVID, right? You're able to make those pivots because you're being empathetic as organizations. Transparency, right? Transparency through leadership, transparency about your business practices and purpose, creating opportunities for employees to find purpose in what they do, having a company that is aligned around a clear mission and vision and values. What we see from the research are that organizations that regularly practice, right? Because this is not an off and on switch, just like it's not a personality trait. Companies are not born fully aware, right? We practice these things over time, and then we codify them and make them our culture through policies, behaviors, internal standards that we uphold. As I go through this and you guys have any questions at all, throw them in the chat, because I'm looking at the chat box as we go. So I'm happy to answer things, just so you know. Okay, so like I said, this concept, right, of organizational well-being, really creating an organization that has these better business outcomes because of the way it sets its people and its systems and its leaders up for success. It's based on the research. And so a lot of the research that goes into what we do and what we're going to talk about today is organizational and positive psychology. So traditional psychology and old school corporate wellness was very much taking the approach of how do we fix things when they're broken? How do we treat people's illnesses? How do we repair people or things right after they're broken? It's focusing on weakness and illness and things being not good, right? And fixing them after they're not feeling well, right? And a lot of the value that was commonly associated with this was how do we, cut cost, which is a limited return, right? Cut cost by making our employees be healthy, right? And if you've ever been in the experience of someone trying to make you be healthy, the only thing you want to do is like rage against that and not do anything that they want you to do, right? So organizational well-being is much more towards this positive psychology end of the spectrum, where we understand now from the research that individual and employee, right? Employee is just another word for individual. Well-being is about giving people the tools that they can then use to thrive. So it's about not going from -5 to 0, but going from 0 to +5, right? And so, yeah, sometimes we're going to be in a moment of 2, but 0 should not be the standard that we're moving towards. +5 can be that standard. How do we help our employees to thrive and flourish and gain strength and prosper? And how do we prevent some of these preventable challenges around work-life balance or the physical challenges that come from sitting all day, right? Really being proactive in that and thinking about how do we get ourselves to that next level? And you can imagine as an individual, when we're taking that perspective, we're not just thinking, how do I find neutral? We're thinking, how can I create more joy? How can I live a more fulfilling life, right? That's where we start to really get that sense of purpose. As organizations, when we start to think about that in that way, that's where we start to see not just a sustained organization, but an innovative organization, an organization at the forefront of their industry, right? Because their people who are running that organization are in a space where they can work hard, be productive, and communicate well together as a team. So just to kind of give you a little, I won't stay long here, but to give you a little bit of a glimpse into what happens when we approach organizational well-being this way, business outcomes are very different. So it's, again, not about those limited cost savings. How do we save money on our healthcare premiums or our pharmacy utilization? It becomes this unlimited potential of what we at On the Goga refer to as these internal impact investments we can make in our people, in our systems, in our teams that will make our business better over time. And so when we look at comprehensive well-being of organizations in this way, we start to see that employees require or they value different types of compensation. So 1 in 3 employees would give up $5,000 a year to work at an organization where they feel happy and fulfilled. companies with happy employees outperform the competition by at least 20%. And there's a multitude of studies out there. Some are in the hundreds of percents of outperforming the competition, even when you're looking at the S&P 500 or the stock market. Happy employees are 19% more accurate when completing tasks. Again, one of the many studies out there on when we are focused, fulfilled, engaged in our work, we're paying more attention, we're doing a better job, right? And we know this experientially, we know this anecdotally, but there's so much research out there now that we can look at and point to say, yeah, that's actually happening individually and in our teams. And this one I think is really interesting, especially as we're in a challenging time where people are asking themselves, like, where am I? What am I doing with my job? How are things changing? What do I want to be doing in my life? 86% of potential employees would not apply to a company with a bad culture, right? And so we can start to see that not only is this really important for making sure our organizations are performing at their best, but it's kind of a non-negotiable, because if we don't do these things, if we don't focus on these things, then other companies will, and we'll get left behind, right? So here's just what this looks like. And one way that you can take this into thinking about your business, whether you are a 3-person coffee shop or you are a 500-person nonprofit serving, the greater Delaware Valley, or an international company, right? You can take this and think about, where is the health of my organization at? How is the well-being of my organization looking right now? We think about this in 3 different ways. All together make organizational well-being. Our employee well-being, which is what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session today. Our policies and systems. So we say, here's a resource, here's a yoga class, here's a meditation, here's, blah, 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 blah. But are you allowed to take that time off in the middle of the day to experience that? Do we actually give you, the benefits and the resources that you need to feel healthy and well, right? So backing up what you offer with what you do. And then leadership, that is like a third crucial component to this. How are leaders interacting with these things? Are leaders encouraging employees to utilize the resources, the policies, and the systems? Are they reinforcing them, or are they kind of working against them? So when we can get leadership well-being, employee well-being, and operations and systems all aligned, that's what creates a truly healthy organization. So just talked a lot. But I wanted to lay that groundwork for you, because as we start to think about employee well-being and what makes employees healthy, we have to think about this not as a Band-Aid, not as something we're going to do for 5 minutes, but really moving ourselves. And this is a long-term benefit to your organization, moving ourselves towards, how do we do business? And is it supporting the well-being of our business, right? If we take this back down to the individual level, right? We can be running 10 miles a day because we think we should be doing it. But if we're ignoring the fact that our ankles are hurting and our back is hurting, and we're ignoring our, dog that needs to go out for a walk because we need to run 10 miles a day, it's not actually helping the well-being of our organization. So as you start to think about strategies for your employees, we need to be thinking about, okay, are these choices that we're making good for employee well-being, backed up by policies and systems, and something that leadership can really get behind, right? So now let's shift our focus into organizational well-being in the time of COVID, because this time has just vastly impacted not only our individual well-being, but the well-being of our organizations. As Marla had mentioned in the beginning of this webinar today, the challenges we're going through as organizations, as business leaders, as business owners, they are economic, they are well-being, industries are shifting, right? And so every aspect of our organization's well-being has been impacted, and employee well-being specifically. We'll go through how COVID has impacted all 3 of those areas of the triangle, right? From employee well-being, there have been just so many direct threats to the physical health, right? Coronavirus itself, the emotional well-being, the community and social interaction, the financial health and well-being, and the environmental, how we are interacting with our environment well-being of individual employees. So COVID and quarantine have really impacted the individuals, which they're the ones going to work in your organizations, right? For leaders, for many of you out there, there's this you are all individuals as well, right? And you have the added stress. We have the added stress of managing not only our well-being, but the well-being of our teams, right? And trying to meet this huge demand for quick and constant organizational change, right? You may have been a leader of your organization for 25 years, and you are doing things in the last 12 months that you either have never done before, if it's a technology piece, right? Or haven't had to do in years and years and years and years because you have to rebuild certain systems, right? So finally, operational well-being. COVID obviously has forced all of our businesses to change the ways they operate, communicate, and even make money at this really fundamental level. So all of this is happening. And the question here then becomes, how can I improve my organization's well-being? The good news is that no matter the size, industry, or nuances of your business, there are so many things you can do to enhance our organization's well-being, and employee well-being is at the core of that, because those are the people coming to work every day. Those are the people who are going to be either putting themselves into the work or having to pull back from the work because of the challenges to their own well-being. And so that's what we're going to focus in on. So I'm curious if you guys want to throw in the chat box really quick, just where your teams are working from right now, because this is just one of the factors that changes how we talk about how to develop employee well-being programs during a time of COVID. So if you're able to open up that chat box and just type A, if you're 100% remote team, B, if you're mostly remote, C, if you're mostly on site, or D, if you're 100% on site. While the fundamental questions we ask ourselves that help us develop the employee well-being programs don't change, if you are 100% remote or 100% on site, the how and the what of what we do changes a lot depending, right? Yeah, so here's a great example, right? Sam in the chat box said we're 100% remote, and Ruth said we are 100% frontline, right? Sam said PIDC is 100% remote with a couple of people showing up at the office once a week to do essential functions, right? And so you can even see one person engaging in a workplace, your entire workplace being on the front line, being essential workers, or your entire workplace being remote. Many of the same challenges, many different challenges, and a different approach is needed when we're thinking about what do we want to do when we're developing this program. But like I said, the questions we're going to ask ourselves, the process that we're going to go through, which is what we're going to talk about next, that remains the same. So whether you are 100% remote, 100% on-site frontline, or a mix, what we're going to do now is we're going to go through the thought process of how do I want to think about developing my employee well-being program. And I'm going to give you guys some specific ideas, but there's no silver bullet. There's no one size fits all. It's really, as leaders, about learning how to ask the right questions to make sure that we're putting the right resources in front of our team. So if we zoom in on employee well-being, the first thing that we have to do, right, thinking back to those organizational well-being skills, empathy, transparency, understanding, awareness are so important. We have to know what our team needs. And so when we're thinking about our team's needs, a couple of things to keep in mind. Number one, whoever we are, whatever we're doing, we as leaders have blind spots to the needs of our team. Why might we have blind spots to the needs of our team? Because our lived experience may be different from the lived experience of someone on our team. This can happen for a lot of reasons. Maybe you own several stores in Philadelphia, right? You can mostly do your work from home. Your employees are going into your on-site location every day. You don't have to think necessarily about not just what's on the on-site location, but getting to work, commuting, using public transportation, right? And so it's not because we don't want to know or we're stupid. It's just that this is our life and we're not exposed to the experiences that somebody else might be having. So understanding our team's needs, it's really important to think about, what are the experiences of my team? What challenges are they going through? What do they need? And the best way to do this is to ask, right? Maybe you feel like you have a really fundamental understanding of your team's needs, right? Maybe you're like, I think I know what my team wants, but I'm not exactly sure. No matter what, there are a couple of different things you can do. Number one, surveying. Surveying, there's a pros and cons to surveying, but they're a really important part of understanding your team's needs, because if you do them anonymously, it gives people a chance to voice concerns that they might not tell you out loud. I don't care if you're the most a warm, approachable CEO or business leader, there are certain things that people don't necessarily feel comfortable sharing. And so giving them an anonymous forum to share those is really important. Focus groups, town halls where you're engaging in conversation and really as a leader seeking to listen and learn for what those needs are. At On the Goga, we think about 5 different pillars of well-being that you can think about when you're assessing these needs. So the first is emotional. So emotionally, what are my people dealing with? Are they feeling stress? Are they feeling burnout? If you want to share in the chat, whatever is coming up for your team right now, emotional well-being challenges that they're facing, feel free to do that, because there's so many, and would be happy to talk through any specific ones that you guys have identified. Part of it is understanding what's going on. There's high stress, there's high uncertainty, right? Another part of it is understanding how that's affecting work, right? So if people are feeling like they're really stressed, and then they're feeling like they're losing productivity, that's going to be a different resource that needs to be provided versus if somebody is feeling stressed and they're feeling like they're not able to communicate with their coworkers, right? So we're not just asking what's going on, but we're really starting to think about, how is that affecting you? How is it affecting your work, right? And, not to discount, or we can't gloss over the fact that sometimes what is impacting someone's work is work related, but sometimes it's totally not work related. Maybe you're not a parent, but one of your employees is a parent and they're really struggling with managing doing calls like they would normally do while their children are doing work behind the scenes, right? Or not doing work, as it often happens. So emotional well-being, thinking about that. Physical well-being. So the quarantine, the pandemic, a couple of different things. If you have a lot of people that are working from home, there's so many physical challenges to working from home. Most employees don't have an ergonomic home office setup. They might not even have the space they need. Some of us are working in our kitchen, right? And so we're working in the kitchen and the refrigerator's right there, and we're just eating a lot more than we normally would. Couple that with the emotional challenges that are going on, and that can create more physical challenges. Maybe like Ruth, you have a lot of employees that are out there on the front line, right? So you need to be concerned about PPE and protective equipment, making sure that your employees know what their options are if they're feeling sick, when they should show up, when they should stay home, right? So thinking about that physical aspect of the well-being of your teams. Community. So community well-being is all about the connections and relationships that we build. This might be within our organization, but this might just simply be that you have members of your team who live in isolation right now, right? Or you have members of your team that aren't able to connect with a faith community that they used to get a lot of joy and community from normally, right? You might have people that aren't able to, see their friends, see their family members. There's so many of us out there who have family members who are born, or unfortunately, and really sadly, family members who have passed, that we haven't been able to fully experience these life events, right? And so acknowledging and understanding, what are the needs of your team? How can we create either space for them to engage with each other, or give them space to make sure that they feel comfortable engaging with the other people around them, within their own families and their communities in a safe way. Financial. So this is a challenging one for employers to kind of reckon with, because we are dealing with the financial health of our companies and trying to manage what is our responsibility to the financial health of our employees, right? And so sometimes, and a really important thing to note here is, sometimes this conversation, identification of your employees' needs is about noticing that there are certain things that have come up for an employee's financial health. Maybe their partner was laid off. Maybe you had to do salary rollbacks because that's what was going to keep your organization afloat, that you can't necessarily fix the source of that stress, but it's still important to talk about it. It's important to name it. It's important to understand it when you're building an employee well-being program, because otherwise it's not going to land, right? If it's not really addressing the problem, even if it doesn't solve the problem, then it's not going to feel authentic for that person. And we all know if it feels like we're being given a tool that's just being given to us because it feels like it should be, we're much less likely to use it than someone really thoughtfully assessing what our needs are and then bringing resources to the table to help in the ways that we can. So finally, the fifth pillar of well-being that we think about is environmental. So again, if you're working from home, we are all sick of waking up in the same four walls, right? If you are working on the front line, you have how you're navigating, getting from home to work. You have civil unrest happening in different areas of the country and feeling unsafe going to work or whatever it may be, based on your personal lived experience, right? Whatever that looks like for you. And so thinking about these 5 pillars, not just how are the biometrics of my team, right? When we really start to look at it through this lens, it becomes so clear that zooming in only on one aspect of physical well-being or, just do a yoga class, right? It's not really going to address the well-being of our teams. This first assessment of, wow, this is this kind of robust, dynamic, really nuanced assessment of what's going on for my team. And it's not square peg, square hole, right? It's an array of different life experiences, different people with different roles, doing different things with different family stuff going on, different access to technology or whatever it may be. So it's important to, after we've done the assessment of what our team's needs are, then we can start looking at providing resources. So now is when we're going to, hopefully as we've gone through that, you've been thinking about, oh yeah, these are some of the things that my team is dealing with right now, physically, emotionally, financially, community, environmentally. Now we're going to get into some practical ideas and strategies for what you can do to implement a well-being program for your team. These are not one size fits all, but I tried to put out kind of an array of different options that kind of range from policy to experiences, more like a workshop or a skill that you can assess, from things that cost money to things that don't cost any money at all, right? So let's go back through all 5 pillars and think about this. So from an emotional perspective, there's a lot of different things we can do to support the emotional well-being of our teams. And again, I just want to reiterate, when we say emotional well-being, that's not just like a couple of things, right? That is a really broad range of everything from mental health, which is a lot of what you guys have been talking about over these past several sessions. It also has to do with, if people are feeling joyful, if people are feeling connected with their work, if people feel like they have the resources they need to take self-care, take some time for themselves. So here are a few practical options. Number 1, if your organization has the ability to do this, this is a paid benefit you can provide to your employees. It's called an EAP, an Employee Assistance Program. Many of you out there may have these already. These are organizations that provide your employees with benefits to help them get through challenging times. So they can help with financial crises, they can help with grief and loss counseling, they can help with finding therapists or providing mental health coaching resources. There's just basically this kind of organization that you can provide as a benefit where your employees can call and get help for the challenging things that are going on in their life. So if you don't have an EAP, but you want a, thoughtful, kind of diverse resource way to provide various types of mental health support to reduce the stress of your team, to help them get through their challenging times, that, it puts it in the hand of an expert. As CEOs, as business leaders, as owners, whatever your role is within the company, most of us are not therapists. Most of us are not trained in dealing with the nuances of our individual employees' needs. And so also, delegating that to an EAP can be really effective just for making sure that you're actually giving the right and appropriate resources to your team. One that doesn't cost money per se, you don't have to pay out of pocket for it, but something that does have a financial impact, and oftentimes in the aggregate, a good one, is providing specific well-being time off. So this is a really practical kind of detail that I want to point out. A lot of companies have been giving additional PTO, hoping that their employees will use it. And what they find is their employees are just hoarding it until they can go to Cabo, right? We encourage a lot of our teams to give specific well-being time off, either a specific day that the entire organization gets off, or a block of, 5 to 10 to 15, however generous you're able to be, days that your team can only use during the pandemic, right? So that they actually take that time off. It's so important as leaders to understand that giving that time helps to reduce stress levels, which reduces burnout, which increases productivity over time. So as a business leader, if you're thinking about that and you're like, I just can't imagine giving my team members a whole day off, right? It's like, we're going to pay for that in other ways if we don't do it now. So that's something to consider, and really being specific. This is to be used now. Don't save it for Cabo. You have plenty of other PTO days that you're not going to use this year for that. Mental health coverage. So it's an important time to talk to your insurance broker and ask them, what are our mental health coverages under our health insurance, if you're able to offer health insurance to your team? If you don't have mental coverage under your health insurance plan and you're not up for a plan change anytime soon, another thing to consider is giving mental health supplement, like stipends to your team members to cover X amount per year towards a mental health service of their choice. There's a lot of different ways so that there's a lot of teletherapy organizations out there where you can offer your employees like their first month free to that, to encourage them to utilize those services. And it's really important whenever we give a service, not to just sign it up and never talk about it, but to really put it into a communication plan so your team knows what's going on. So from a skill building perspective, a lot of the workshops that have been really popular for employees and our clients at this time are mindfulness, right? Just that basic self-regulation, learning to understand, how do I regulate my own stress and emotions? Meditation, slightly different than mindfulness. That's like really kind of a seated meditation. This is one of those things, if it works for you, it's great. If it doesn't work for you, you're probably not going to utilize it. We tend to steer our clients more towards mindfulness, which is a much more applied, universal, just noticing what a deep breath feels like, how our emotions are interacting with our body at this particular moment to help with that self-regulation when the stress happens. And then another big one is boundary setting, having conversations with your team, working, giving them a workshop from a professional to understand what boundaries need to be set between work and home and life around our self-care, to make sure that we are caring for ourselves, because as we all know, that's always the first thing to go. All right, the next group of resources to talk about are physical resources. So obviously, especially if you're like Ruth on the front line, PPE and social distancing, really important, really making sure that your employees understand what's going on, what the boundaries are around those. Making sure that if your people are working from home, that they are encouraged to take time to get up and move. Making sure that your healthcare benefits are usable to people, making sure that telehealth is included in your healthcare benefits, encouraging people to take walking meetings. We don't need to be on Zoom all the time. If you have an opportunity, you're working remotely, and you can have a meeting where people take it on the phone and go out on a walk, that can be a really simple way to encourage people to get up and move. Offering recommendations, classes on nutrition, cooking, ergonomics, how to set up your workspace to be more ergonomic. From a community perspective, we want to think about creating social gathering times virtually, right? So some of the things that we do at On the Goga for our clients, we do virtual wellness quizzos. We have a bartender come in and teach people how to make like a fancy cocktail or mocktail. We do a scavenger hunt where people pull things from around their house and share with their teams, what it means for them, and get to know their team members more in that way. Setting up, if you're working remotely, a virtual co-working link where even if people are just on mute, they can hang out in there and kind of feel like they are around their team, and that link is just open all the time so people can jump in. Enabling people as much as possible to have flexible schedules, especially for caregivers, parents, people caring for other people in their home. Mentor or peer programs. So this one is really, I think, important because one of the things that's lost are these kind of just moments of personal connection. And this can be utilized whether you are an in-person group or whether you are remote, setting up times one-to-one for people to interact with each other. Affinity groups, so creating opportunities for people to gather virtually, have book clubs, talk about their experiences from their unique perspectives, whether it's a women's affinity group, whether it's being BIPOC in the workplace, whatever that looks like for your team, encouraging those, fostering those, making sure people know that those are welcome in your organization. And virtual volunteering. So Jasmine was saying she did an outdoor park cleanup. That's awesome, but there's a lot of volunteer opportunities we can do together as a group, whether it's a fundraiser drive, whether it's phone banking for some group that is really value aligned with your organization. There's a lot we can do there. I'm just getting through these practical tasks or options for you guys so that you can take some really tangible things away. Financial. This one goes without saying in many ways, but it is really important to consider as leaders fair wages. It's this balance between what is the most generous we can be within the confines of what's going on for our organization right now. And to consider that if you have to do wage cuts, if you have to do, whatever you have to do, a lot of us had to do furloughs, all of that. What else can you provide, maybe at no cost to your team? Can you provide these opportunities for them to connect? Can you provide professional development opportunities for them during this time? How else can you compensate them and make them feel that they're a valued part of your organization? Like I said, doing an assessment of your benefits, providing support for financial planning. If you have a 401k, inviting that advisor in to talk about how people should be thinking about their money planning and strategy. Basic budgeting classes. This is something that we do a lot with our clients. And even potentially, if it's within your budget, giving a well-being stipend to your team for everything from gym and fitness online to home office stipends, right? Maybe an ergonomic, it doesn't have to be this $500 standing desk, right? An ergonomic mouse, even just a more comfortable chair, even just sneakers so that if they are standing and doing work, they're feeling a little bit better. Second monitors, all of these types of things. You can do ergonomics assessments, something we do a lot with our clients where you have a PT or a chiropractor meet one-on-one with your clients, look at their home office space and provide recommendations. Information on sustainable living. We're all in our homes right now, just making sure that our home design and our experience with our home feels really sustainable. And then finally, technology and equipment, making sure that your people have the tools, the Wi-Fi, everything that they need to do their work from home. Or again, if you're on site, making sure that you are thinking about how do we use technology to decrease the amount of face-to-face interaction that has to happen? Can we have people paying online? Are there different pieces of technology that enable us to create a safer environment for our teams and even just a lower stress environment for our teams? So I know I just gave you a lot of resources, but that's because maybe one of these resonated with you, maybe two of them, like whatever it is. Maybe it was just the process of going through and thinking about the well-being of your teams a little bit differently. Start small. Remember that these things you're gonna implement, they're not a Band-Aid. Do not think about these as things that you're going to, some of them maybe like PPE, right? In certain circumstances, but don't think about these as things you're going to give and then take away, right? From a leadership perspective, it's super important that anything we do is actually for the well-being of our organization, and therefore we feel comfortable making the investment. We definitely don't want to provide a lot of resources and then COVID's over and we're like, oh, never mind. You don't need these anymore. Make sure that they make sense for you. Make sure your leaders understand what you're providing. Maybe it's even part of your well-being program is just providing for your leadership some extra training on how to manage teams remotely, how to help with caregiver fatigue, how to manage their own stress and the well-being of their team in a way that they've never really had to do before. defining these new norms. So really making sure that you're reinforcing what you're saying. Oh, it's okay to take a break at lunch to go on a walk. Make it a policy. Block off from 12 to 1 or whatever it is to say, or say it's okay to put a block on your calendar. It's okay to leave the building and go do something, right? And finally, make it sure that it's aligned with your values. Again, assume that these well-being policies are your, long-term investment in your team. And so don't overpromise, right? Don't do too much. Start small, start with a few simple things. Make sure that the investments you're making are actually for the betterment of your team. So many of these things, unlike a lot of things in life, these things are positive catch-22s. They're good for your team. They're good for your organization over time, which makes you more likely to reinvest, which makes your employees more likely to invest back in your company. So think about those things that are going to make an impact now and make an impact later. So before we get into any Q&A left at the end, I just want to bring out a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We just had MLK Day yesterday, and I think that this quote really speaks to the importance of this right now and why and how employee and organizational well-being makes such a difference to our teams. Our very survival depends on our ability to stay awake, to adjust to new ideas, and to remain vigilant and to face the challenge of change. Starting an employee well-being program can and should be a joyful addition to your current journey of navigating the change of coronavirus. And it takes courage, it takes innovation, it takes thinking in new ways. And so of all of the reasons you have to do that right now, let the development of an employee well-being program be an exciting, uplifting, energizing use of your time. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or just raise your hand and we will unmute you and you guys can ask questions. But if you have to hop off, I know we're all really super busy. It was such a pleasure to meet you. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, or you just want to get in touch, you can reach out to us at On the Goga. It's just www.onthegoga.com. Yeah, and I hope to talk to all of you guys again soon. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand.
Anna, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
It's a lot of information, but there are so many small steps that people can take. So the environment that we're living in can be overwhelming. And guess what? It may not be going away anytime soon. Who thought a year ago that we'd be sitting here in January of 2021? And so taking advantage of small steps. So it doesn't have to be anything outrageous. Anna offered a lot of steps that we can take. A book club, taking walks. Someone said that they exercise daily in the home, and it can be small cardios, getting up from your computer, giving yourself breaks. It's so easy to stay plastered in front of these computers all day without the benefit of having colleagues around who pull your attention away from a computer, which is a good thing. And we didn't always think maybe it was a good thing, but little things that you can do, listening to music, taking rides, just small things that you can do. I will say be careful with the alcohol because you're home and there are kind of no limitations. So you want to be careful how much,
Absolutely. I think it's
how many drinks you're taking.
Yeah, I think it's so important what you're saying, Marla, this idea of starting small. And sometimes, from an employee well-being perspective, it's just about communicating that to your teams and not putting these unrealistic expectations on them or yourself, right? It can actually be harmful to our mental health when everyone around us is saying like, oh, well, you should really try eliminating all sugar from your life or whatever it is, right? Just even if the only thing you do is have these conversations with your team, acknowledge this is hard and it's been hard and we're tired, right? And it's okay to take these small steps. And I agree. I think when it comes to anything, whether we're choosing to, whether or not we want to have a glass of wine on a Friday night or all of that. There's no one right answer. It's all about this approach of awareness. How is this making me feel? Is this what is doing good for me, right? And making our decisions based on that. And when we can do that as leaders and encourage our organizations to do that, that's when, you know, that skill set just becomes so powerful, and it just reinforces itself over and over and over again. So I totally agree.
And it's official that the days are getting longer. So we have a longer period of daylight, which is when I noticed the clocks, I think last week or the week before, it was like, oh, spring is on the way. Yes. And so even something as small as that, noticing the daylight extends until after 5 o'clock now, it's like, yes, another season is coming. Spring, it's fresh. So yeah, any questions, raise your hands or put your questions in the Q&A box, and Anna will answer your question, or we will unmute you. Or how about this? If there's something that you are doing that maybe Anna didn't cover today, and it's working for you, and you want to share it with the rest of the group, feel free to do that also. Yeah, so we don't suggest that we have all of the answers. You may have found something that works very, very well for you. Share it with us. Let us know what it is. So it's 9:57. We have about 3 more minutes left. If the questions come in and we go a little over, that's okay. We want to make sure that we are addressing your concerns, addressing your needs. What's most important for us is that you, as the business owner, have these tools available not only to your employees, but to you in your home, with your friends, with your neighbors, with your colleagues. So people deal with this environment in different ways. So if you've seen anything today, it may not necessarily fit you, but it may fit someone else. So remember that today's presentation will be available on PIDC's website. So if you want to come back and get some information, please make sure you are doing that. Samantha, our partner from Scattergood, anything you want to add? Quinn, if we can unmute Samantha, if there's anything you want to add today. Sam?
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Anna. I just put in the chat box that make sure that your physical health plans are covering behavioral health services as they are required to. So unfortunately, there have been a lot of violations around behavioral health coverage. So it's something to look into. You can go to paritytrack.org to get a little bit of information about like what is parity, what should plans be covering, and some steps to take if you think you might have been denied coverage or your employees. One of the things that we've been doing is that we've noticed that because people are home, in our case, they're scheduling a lot of things like, oh, trying to take care of that door that never got fixed and so on. So what we did is we tried to consolidate Friday to be a no meeting day so that people have a lot of flexibility in their schedules to take care of people, you know, working on the house, or maybe you're working on something. So still a work day, but giving more flexibility to how you want to do that work and getting stuff done, because I know for myself, I am able to get more stuff done than I ever was able to around our house. Yeah. And then the other thing, you know, things that we've done, like Anna's talked about, is we provided a link to free yoga. We got an employee wellness stipend so that we could take classes, get massages, or do whatever people needed to do. We've joked about wanting Pelotons in our house and other things, but I think just trying to figure out how to keep, moving and attending to these things. And, you know, I really appreciate all the suggestions, Anna, that you made.
Yeah, absolutely. I love these thoughts and ideas, Sam, and I feel like they really pull to this importance of the policy backup for this, right? Because it's so important to have these conversations. And and what you're saying is like, we've gone ahead and made a policy that on Friday, we don't have meetings, right? And that's so powerful to, you know, reinforce that, or we've given a stipend, right? That's like a policy. And those are those behavioral practices of the organization. So I love that. And those are both great answers and really popular. I mean, setting work hours, saying these are the hours you work, these are the hours you can do meetings, giving stipends for different things, even just to your point of team members having a forum to share, here's what I'm doing. Wouldn't it be great to get a Peloton, right? The difference between, and not just allowing, but encouraging the conversation versus not, makes all the difference when we think about just organizational well-being. So I love those. Awesome. Well,
I am just putting in the chat part 5 of this series. We're coming towards the end. So today is part 4. Part 5 is going to be on Tuesday, February 16th at 9 o'clock. And we're going to talk about then behavioral health care for you or your loved ones. Behavioral health, that's a hot topic right now. We're seeing it manifest itself in our community. We're hearing about it with interactions between law enforcement officers and citizens. And even if it's not interaction between law enforcement, just how your children may be dealing with not being able to physically interact with their classmates, not being able to enjoy some things that they normally enjoy. So it's not just adults who may experience behavioral health challenges during this time. So on Tuesday, the 3rd Tuesday for February, we're going to bring part 5 of this series. And so let's see, I see we have some comments in the chat. It's so good to see so many people, so many friendly faces on today's webinar. We usually have the opportunity to interact face-to-face in the office, but this is the next best thing. And so to all of our friends, our new friends, our older friends, thank you so much for joining us. If there are other topics that you find we have not addressed that are important to you, please make sure you put that information in the chat, or feel free to send that information to me at my email address, which I just put in the chat also. We want to make sure all of the information that we are providing is relevant to you, it is helpful to you, and we will find the subject matter experts to make sure we can get that information to you. Before we end on tomorrow, we are again, Bissy, is good to see you. On tomorrow, we are again partnering with our partners at the Small Business Administration. We're going to talk about the new round of Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Programs. So we encourage you to join us tomorrow afternoon at 12:30. So please make sure you register. Go on PIDC's website now, register for tomorrow's workshop. Bring your questions, and we will have our SBA experts from the Eastern Pennsylvania District Office with us to answer all of those questions. If you were on with us on last Tuesday, you know we spent at least an hour just answering questions. And so make sure, and then I think we answered over 100 questions. We still had questions left over at the end of the session. So PIDC has committed to tomorrow and then another session on February 17th. We want to make sure you as business owners get all the information that you need. Tell a friend, tell a colleague, another business owner, if they have questions, haven't been able to identify all of the answers to their questions, have them join us also. And so with that, Jasmine, any parting remarks? And Quinn?
Hi, Marla. Yes, I just want to thank everybody for coming today. We're so glad to have you. And thank you so much to Anna for providing such helpful information. And speaking of resources for you and your employees, I just want to remind you to utilize PIDC. We do have a lot of free resources for you through our newsletter, our social media updates, as well as our COVID-19 resource page. So please check those out. I'm going to put that in the chat box for you so you will have those links. And utilize our services as well. We are definitely here for you during this unprecedented time.
Great. So Anna, you're going to close us out. Just like if all hearts and minds are clear, that's what we say in church, you're going to give us the benediction.
Oh my gosh. Well, I just want to say thank you guys all so much for coming. I know that it's a feat just to make time the day after a holiday to come in and think about the well-being of your employees. So I commend all of you for taking the time. And if you have any questions at all, PIDC, on the Goga, Scattergood, we're here to help. We want to know how we can be supportive of you. So always feel welcome to reach out to any of us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. And one thing I want to make sure I mention, this series is a partnership between the Scattergood Foundation and Spectrum Health Services. And so we want to make sure you are aware that we are working with healthcare professionals across the city to bring you the best information possible. So Scattergood Foundation, Spectrum Health Services, we thank you so much. Anna, thank you for today. And we look forward to seeing you on tomorrow afternoon at 12:30. Bring your lunch and your non-alcoholic beverage, and save it until 4:30. Save it until 4:30, right?
A 4:30 p.m. PPP loan conversation.
That's right. That's right. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for seeing you again, and we'll see you soon. Take care.